Hello, this is Corey Minor-Smith, Corey Empowers, presenting Mental Wealth Wednesday. We have a dynamic panel here today to talk about a very important subject and topic, which is severe mental illness and the treatment and the resources. Today, we have an array of advocates who are here, and we're going to talk a little bit about something that we all commented on and not necessarily knew each other at the time. Well, I would say that I was a newbie to the group in terms of meeting these wonderful ladies and commenting on some of the posts. And the post is about a news broadcast, a cable news broadcast that talked about an unfortunate incident on a train ride. And I do want to take a moment to extend condolences to the young lady who was murdered on a train in North Carolina. Extending these condolences to her family and friends and loved ones. And as we talk about this very important topic, we want to address concerns, address what has been presented in the media, and ultimately address the dangers of word choices, of insightful, inciting violence and things of that nature.
Brian Kilmeade and the other hosts of Fox and Friends were talking on Wednesday about the murder of 23-year-old Irina Zarutska in North Carolina and how to stop those kinds of crimes when he said this.
Either you take the resources that we're going to give you or you decide that you're going to be locked up in jail. That's the way it has to be now.
Or involuntary lethal injection or something. Just kill them.
Yeah, and it actually happened when we were together on Wednesday, Lawrence. In the morning, we were discussing the murder of Irina Zarutska in Charlotte, North Carolina, and how to stop these kinds of attacks by homeless, mentally ill assailants, including institutionalizing or jailing such people so they cannot attack again. Now, during that discussion, I wrongly said they should get lethal injections. I apologize for that extremely callous remark. I'm obviously aware that not all mentally ill homeless people act as the perpetrator did in North Carolina, and that so many homeless people deserve our empathy and compassion. Lawrence, back to you.
So before we get started in this great conversation, I want to give an opportunity for each of these wonderful ladies to share their names and information about what they do. So we'll start with Sabah, as you are the first one to my right on this Brady Bunch box setup. So Sabah, please tell us a little bit about you and what you do.
Hi, I'm Sabah Muhammad. I am an attorney in Atlanta. I have been a severe mental illness advocate since about 2012, professionally since I joined Treatment Advocacy Center in 2019 as legislative and policy counsel. So I do this work because I have a loved one whose journey with severe mental illness was almost entirely carceral, and it started from high school. And my family quickly discovered that there was no cure-all. There was a lot of pain and advocacy involved, where we thought there would be a lot of treatment and intervention. And we had to become advocates just to save their life, save our own lives. And that led me to dedicate my life full time to advocacy for severe mental illness.
Wow. Thank you for that. And you can pass it to who you would like to go next.
Well, on my right is Randy Kay, so I will pass it to Randy.
Thank you, Sabah. So yes, I'm Randy Kay, and I am the author of a book called Band Behind His Voices, which came out about 12, 13 years ago. There's been a lot that's happened since that book came out. And I also created a podcast with two other mothers of sons with schizophrenia, and it's called Schizophrenia, Three Moms in the Trenches. Sabah has been on our show. So and also, full disclosure, I am a radio broadcaster. I work as the local host for a show called All Things Considered on NPR on our local affiliate in Connecticut called WSHU.
Thank you. Laura?
I guess I'll go next, right? My name is Laura Crichon, and it is a pleasure to be among all wonderful ladies. I think they're amazing, each and every one. My story began 3 years ago when not only did my son develop a sudden onset of psychosis, he got in trouble with the law. And so since then, I thought it would just be an easy task to get him treatment because his illness was so obvious to all of us in the family. But we struggled many, many times for him to be able to be hospitalized 4 times. Now his journey has ended in a state prison sentence. So he is currently incarcerated. He's 23. He has schizoaffective. He's untreated. And the journey still goes on. So I fight from the point of view of how many ways and times this system failed to treat him fairly and efficiently and quickly. So I use my pain for advocacy. I work at NSSC, which is National Shattering Silence Coalition, as their policy action committee co-chair and steering committee member and Massachusetts policy director.
Thank you for coming on. And Deborah?
Hi, I really am honored to be here that you invited me, Corey, and I so respect each one of you for what you've been through, and your voice is so important. You inspire me to keep going, which is really hard to do. I've been at this for about 15 years. My son has schizophrenia, bipolar. It's called schizoaffective. I hate that name, but that's what it is. And he had anosognosia, severely incapacitated by his illness. And so we live in a state that has the sturdy laws for involuntary treatment. So he's benefited from involuntary treatment. He's very close to being placed in the state hospital. And so I have seen what involuntary treatment can bring to someone's life and to the family. And so that is fueling my passion. My husband and I began a nonprofit to kind of a dual thing. Our number one dream is to do housing, and we're close to starting that. But we also see a need in the faith community, in churches, to understand serious mental illness and to know that they have a role to play in supporting families who are in crisis, instead of, asking them to leave the church, or, they're just, I don't want to deal with this, or even going as far as to say schizophrenia is not real. So I'm trying to combat that. And, but I, like all of you, immediately just went into advocacy, and I was in touch with DJ Jaffe, the late DJ Jaffe, who wrote Insane Consequences. And I really learned a lot from him and how he advocates and tries, and he just stayed on topic. And so that's my goal. I want to stay that way. But
Wow.
Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you all. And we all came together because of our advocacy for severe mental illness, the many different names of diagnoses that are there. I said before the call, my loved one was diagnosed with manic depression, paranoid schizophrenia. And it just touched me that you said, Deborah, the names, the names change, or the diagnosis changes. However, the symptoms are still the same, and they can be very just sad and devastating to witness a loved one experience them. But as we join together today, I wanted to talk about the commentary that we're all familiar with. I don't want to replay the video and help the algorithm at all with the commentary, but we heard a call for death, a call for involuntary lethal injection for people who are homeless and living with severe mental illness. And one thing I want to address before any of you respond to this, there's also the conflation of homelessness and living with severe mental illness. And I want to talk about that also, that, there are two separate populations. Yes, there are some people who are homeless that live with severe mental illness, but they're separate populations in that they have different needs. Just because you're homeless doesn't mean you have severe mental illness. And just because you're may have severe mental illness doesn't mean that you're homeless. So in addressing this commentary, I would like to know, Randy, we'll start with you. What was your initial thought when you heard it?
Oh, so many thoughts. First of all, let me kind of piggyback on what you said, because to bring in President Trump's executive order to clear the homeless camps inspired two reactions in me. One was, well, yes, there are people who are homeless who don't know they need help because they don't know they're ill. That's what Laura was talking about, anosognosia. It's a feature of schizophrenia where your frontal lobe is impaired and you're really not aware that you're ill. So there is a population among the homeless who really don't think they need help. They're fine the way they are. There's nothing wrong with them because they're not in treatment. Their brain is impaired, and so it's difficult to help them. For this population, simply providing affordable housing is not the answer. It's not the full answer. However, there obviously are portions, as you said, of the homeless who are there because of domestic violence or, other reasons. And for them, affordable housing could be the entire answer, services to get back on their feet because they know they need the help. For people like my son, who has been homeless at least twice, not thinking he needs any help, and has also been incarcerated because of the way he looked while he was homeless and could easily be accused of something that he didn't do. We have seen that. I agree that I have wished so many times that someone would kind of force my child into help because he didn't know he needed the help. And the only one doing that was me, which I legally can't do. But for that commentator, and in fairness, this was a talk show, so I don't think he planned to say this. Perhaps it just sort of slipped out. And unfortunately, with media the way it is, when something just slips out, it is broadcast to the entire world. So he did apologize later, which I know you'll get to, but that was a horrible, horrible, stupid thing to say and to think. That was my reaction. I generally, because I do work for in a journalist capacity, I don't comment politically, but I do comment on serious mental illness because I advocate all the time for my son. So I thought that was hopeless and more importantly, incredibly uninformed. There is no one size fits all solution to anything, and certainly not that.
How about you, Deborah?
I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat it. It was appalling what he said. I was so appalled. And full disclosure, I'm conservative. I'm a Christian and I'm conservative. And what concerned me about that comment was I don't think it was just isolated, because I'm very active on X and watch a lot of conservatives who I've muted over the past few weeks because there was a frenzy that whipped up over the stabbing that was public. For the first time, it was caught on tape and everyone saw it. These tragedies happen all the time. We've been saying this for 10 years, maybe before that. And so this was caught on tape, and the reaction was, the rhetoric around it was just so hard to read and see. And so when he said that, I wasn't shocked because I had already seen that happening. And then when he said it, I found it really hard. I feel like the reaction was a little bit soft on him, a little bit soft on Fox News. I feel like they needed to be held accountable for that. And I thought the apology was weak. He only admitted to partially what he said. He actually said involuntary lethal injection just killed them. So there's just no excuse for that. But I just don't think it was one person, because if you listen to the conversation, it was very uninformed. And so that was very frustrating. And I just decided, actually, someone in my church contacted me and said, I have an idea for you to focus and to use it as an opportunity to educate. And so that's my goal right now. But but it's hard because I'm a mom, and I know all these stories from all of you and others. And it was sad.
Sabah, what was your initial reaction?
I think my initial reaction was in two parts. First, it was to the just extreme lack of actual informed information that was used to get to the outcome that murder was the answer. And it started with Lawrence Jones saying there are billions of dollars out there for this. And like Randy was saying, conflating homelessness with severe mental illness with any other reason that the infrastructure is failing marginalized people, and they find themselves in need of resources that aren't provided upstream. And I was like, oh, billions? Where is that? Who's getting billions? Does he not know that most of us are dealing with state budgets and state allocations and state county resources? Where are these billions? And then for the money that we do know is there, we know that severe mental illness gets pushed further and further and further into the margins away from those bigger funding sources. So that misinformation presented as confident fact and empathy. The fact that they thought they were describing their empathy and really they were describing their entire lack of empathy was so interesting to me. I don't know where people think empathy lives inside them. These are people with family members who could have a psychotic break at any second. We are all prone to it. Kids in their 20s, older adults. It's like they want to pick and choose which psychotic features are okay. A diabetic psychotic crisis is okay. Dementia, Alzheimer's, okay. If somehow you have any other reason to go in psychosis, they want us treated differently. No upstream resources. They think we've got billions of dollars. And to move that and start showing who you have empathy for and who you have empathy, who you have disgust for, disdain, violent disinterest. That's more like what those words felt like. They definitely were not empathetic in any way. And I don't even know how we get there. To have this conversation that starts about all of the funding for severe mental illness and ends with lethal injection. And like you said at the beginning, they were really responding to the harm that is inherent in our society, but to not sparse those out, to call yourself, I don't know if it's journalism or a talk show, but that is what immediately hit me. Just this, I was like, there are no facts here. There's no informed information here. There's no one here that probably has experienced anything remotely close to what we're fighting for. And then as far as the lethal injection part, I think I text you, that's about as evil as it gets. that was my response as just as a family member. It's so hard to hear that and know you have to now go speak reason to people whose indifference has hardened their hearts beyond any warmth. And how do you get there? Like, it's not even stigma anymore. It's just indifference that presents as evil. And where do we even begin those conversations?
Thank you for that. Laura?
I felt that the apology kind of explained where his thinking was when he was mentioning the lethal injection. I think he was thinking more on the perpetrator who committed a violent act. And that is who he meant as who should be getting the lethal injection. And if that's the case, I mean, there is still something wrong with that. You need to take more concern with your fellow humans who fall ill, that do become violent. And this is a tough one, because until it happened in my family, it was difficult to understand you either are sane and good or insane and bad. Mm-hmm. And there's a gray area that exists that not many people talk about or know about. And we do need to flesh this out, because when you become insane or psychotic, there is a point where you don't know right from wrong, and you are in your own delusion and reality. And there is a lot of members of our organization that have had this experience, and they're lovely, great citizens now, and they've been completely reformed and recovered. they were temporarily not well because of an illness that was given to them. And they, just like cancer or diabetes, they happened to lose reality to such a degree that the violent act occurred. In my family, that's what happened with my son, who was so in his extreme psychosis that he thought his father was the devil. Now, his father is his very best friend. There is no one closer to him. And to this day now, he speaks of it like, I can't believe I did that, because I was thinking I was saving my own life. I thought my life was in danger. That is why I attacked my father. And, you know, if police hadn't arrived, there would have been a tragedy. But he committed many acts during psychosis that he would normally never do. And he has to live with those now. But it was not for lack of trying. And this is the other piece. Lawrence Jones, he talks as if you just need to lock them up because they're not taking their meds or they're not behaving, and therefore they should be incarcerated. Well, the executive order, it talked more about having them have more aggressive programs like the assisted outpatient treatment, where you are watching the progress of their mental health treatment in the community to such an extent that if you see it spiraling down and lack of going to therapy or going to your treatment, then they intervene in a preventative measure, not afterwards. So these are the programs that Lawrence needs to know about. And he also needs to know what anosognosia is and how it's not a behavioral, it's not a denial, it's an actual neurological symptom that comes about when you are this ill that you don't know you need medicine, similar to an Alzheimer's patient not knowing they have a memory issue. That compassion that you're talking about, I think, could be cleared up with a few sentences to Lawrence. And so that is my hope, that this stopped everyone enough to put a little pause and say, okay, let's look at why this happened, why this statement happened. We need more attention. We've needed it for a long time.
Absolutely. Randy, I saw you raise your hand in affirmation.
Yes. Well, you know, because you all make so many good points. And as I said in my comment on LinkedIn, this isn't about left or right or conservative or liberal or everything in between, because I'm not a huge fan of labels, but we all have something very much in common, that we love someone with a serious mental illness, and we're all out there advocating in a way that we want to make the world better. So I love the commonality in this group, and our hearts are in it. And I agree with you totally, Laura, that empathy, you know, building empathy and understanding is important. From someone who lives in a state, Connecticut, that doesn't have assisted outpatient treatment, I have to say that although the intent may be good with the executive order, the lack of services completely at the moment negates that desire. My son was incarcerated for something, and he was pre-trial. And he's such a good kid most of the time that he qualified for a jail diversion program, which is, you know, treatment, a wonderful thing. And now that he was in the criminal justice system, he had to do it. So that was kind of like AOT, which you get in the criminal justice system. But it took 10.5 months for a bed to open up. So he was in jail for almost a year before there was any place for him to go to get the treatment that he wanted. When people are, quote, rounded up from the homeless camps, I want to know, where do they go? There, you know, is the jail system supposed to now be our mental health system? They're not equipped for that. They're not trained for that. Now, I was fortunate in that where my son was, they did give him his medication, and, you know, that did help him. But the problem is there aren't, as Sabah was saying, there aren't the billions of dollars being invested. It's all very well and good to say, hey, let's round them up and get them somewhere. But where? Where are the treatment? There's story after story after story like mine, where recently when my son did get out and he ended up making a bad decision, A drug dealer moved into his apartment. He was kicked out and sleeping in ATM vestibules for 3 months. Wow. I was in touch with the police and I said, can you arrest him? At least we can't arrest anyone for being homeless. So, they couldn't do anything. I said, what about if he's panhandling? We can't arrest him for that. So I literally was speaking to police and mental health things behind the scenes, pulling all the strings I could. And there was no one able to help him because they couldn't. And there was no place to put him. The lack of services, because there is a lack of understanding of what treatment can and should look like for someone with mental health issues. Now, my son is the most gentle person. He would save a fly rather than kill it. However, I never know what his voices would tell him is in his best interest. Every one of us on this panel probably lives with that fear. If they're not being treated, how would their brain change? So it's not the lack of intent, it's the lack of support in terms of research and services that is missing to help people like our loved ones who need to not only not be homeless, but to get better, which they can.
So you all have mentioned about resources, funding that's supposed to be there, billions of dollars, as it was said. But we know that there is something that is a tremendous barrier to help for our loved ones, and that is the IMD exclusion. Who would like to share a little bit about the IMD exclusion, what it is, how does it prevent help that our loved ones may need? And I'll put it with this. I learned this phrase, treat, street, repeat. Treat, street, repeat. Because that is the cycle that many loved ones go through with severe mental illness, and that if they do something that meets the criteria to be involuntarily committed, pink slipped, there's only so much time that a mental health facility is able to hold them. So with the IMD exclusion, that's the Institutions for Mental Diseases. And institutions for mental diseases, such as a mental health hospital, a state hospital, you may have heard it called, can only hold a person for so long. And their treatment can only be for so long if they're on Medicaid or Medicare, because those acts that establish Medicaid and Medicare have an exclusion that they cannot be in, the states cannot receive a reimbursement for funds to these types of institutions if they have so many beds and for however long the stay may be. I don't have those exact numbers, but basically, if there is a mental health institution, they can only have a certain number of beds available for people with severe mental illness, and they can only hold them there for so long in providing them with treatment. And with families like mine, as families that are represented today, that treatment may look like 1 day or 3 days, no more than 14 days. And that's not enough time, depending on how much the loved one's mental health has decomposed. It's not enough time to get them back stable before they're out on the street again, and very likely not receiving the treatment and the resources that they need. And it's only a matter of time that they may be back in a facility. So that is treat, street, repeat.
I think you pretty much covered it, actually, the way, and I will add that the treat, street, repeat is about discharging them the moment they're stable, not when they're ready to be discharged. How many times? My son's been hospitalized 12 times so far. And the criteria to get somebody, harm to yourself or others, there's a vast difference between harm to yourself or others or potential harm to yourself or others. There was an incident in my family where my son endangered my life. He didn't mean to, but he was trying to stop my car from driving away. Pulled open my car door, tried to climb in to get me to stop the car. He was in psychosis at the time. And I had to keep going. And I actually knocked him down. He got up and ran after me, so I knew he was okay. To me, that is harm to yourself or others. That was not enough. to get him hospitalized.
Right.
Well, getting back to the IMD exclusion, it limits, it's a rule that was put in place in 1965. I think it has had a devastating impact. I think it's a secret rule that's been a thread for decades through every president, every administration ignores it. People don't want to touch it because they say it costs too much money if we open up this limit. Just think about this. So hospitals will not be reimbursed if they care for somebody, if they have more than 16 beds that are dedicated for psychiatric care. Now, there are different, what do you call those? The states have to do an agreement, and you have to apply. Yes, you have to apply for that every 2 months and start. It's ridiculous. They're making extra work for advocates, and I feel like this group of people has no voice. The seriously mentally ill are not voters. They can't show up and talk and speak up for themselves, and they are overlooked. And I think we need to shout from the rooftops. I think the IMD exclusion would open up that funding, and we need to push back against this counter thing that it's going to cost too much. We are already spending billions, wasting billions in criminal justice, homeless outreach, and these tragedies. We're going to keep seeing these tragedies. It's not going to go away. We have to address the IMD exclusion, and we have to stop accepting this. And as advocates, I feel like we're always asked to compromise. Well, no one else has. There would be an outcry if they limited payment for cancer patients or diabetes or other kind of illnesses. Why is it that it's okay to discriminate against the seriously mentally ill this way? And so I think the IMD is a key. I really do. And I just think it's wrong that we just keep accepting that each administration just ignores it and pushes it down the road.
Yeah, I agree. My comments about the IMD exclusion, I always used to say why number 16 was one of my least favorite numbers. Now I say, what are we doing for the 17th person that can't get a bed? And I think as a public defender, I would say those are the people who become my clients, who could have gotten treatment but could not get a bed. All these preventable tragedies start with lack of upstream treatment, lack of empathy. As a public defender, in my court calendar, there were always individuals who were simply too sick to defend themselves, too sick to find family members. And as a public defender, trying to do that different step of not only being a lawyer, but being an advocate and trying to find where in the system let these people down. They had families almost all the time. Some of their families didn't even know they were wound up in the state of Georgia. And it's that narrative. We think, 16 beds is enough because if you need help, you'll get it. When we say severe mental illness, when we say serious mental illness, we're talking about people like our loved ones who may not know which state they're in, who might think that their loved ones are been transplanted with someone else. And we sound like we're advocating for something that is niche, something that is small, but these untreated outcomes impact all of us. And I don't mean where we need to fear for our lives. It impacts all of us where we need to look at our infrastructure. And the IMD exclusion is one of those places of infrastructure where we're failing so many people. And it may have had a good intention because our historic laws of warehousing and no one wants to go back to where you can lock someone away for their beliefs or for their gender. No one wants that. We want a nuanced system that understands individualized infrastructure so that a number like 16 isn't crippling us and making, if our loved one is that 17th person, can't get a bed for 10 months. And we can't let that indifference say, well, jail is a fine bed. No, it's not when this is treatment. This is mental health. This is health. This is mind, body, physical health. We can't just say the criminal system has beds, let them go there. If we're the well ones, if we're the ones with empathy and compassion, that level of indifference is not enough. And I think that level of indifference is reflected in the IMD exclusion. It's federal discrimination. And it's just like you said, from administration to administration, just it continues. And it's our indifference as a whole with marginalized groups. And we got to start with ourselves and just think of the different things we're indifferent about because we don't think they impact us. And we have to be those advocates. We have to be the advocates we wish everyone could be for our family members and for people they don't know. So I know we have to care about the 17th person. We have to care about that 17th bed.
That's a very powerful thing to think about in terms of the number and whether it's arbitrary or based on a calculation. You don't know. But I think Laura or Randy, you may have brought up the executive order. And what I find in terms of the executive order is that it is paving a foundation that was already laid. And that foundation is with the City of Grants Pass versus Johnson, where our Supreme Court has issued the decision to allow municipalities to be able to enforce camping, however it's termed, people who are sleeping outdoors. They're able to have their ordinances that can criminalize basically homelessness. I know that homelessness is a significant issue in this country, but as we have pointed out at the top, we have to not conflate these issues and know that there are different needs that need to be met in terms of homelessness. But we have now the Supreme Court's decision, now this executive order, and then comments. And as Deborah has pointed out, it's not an isolated comment in terms of what to do with people who are homeless, have severe mental illness, and maybe both issues are in their lives. So when you, as an advocate, hear about these different things, we have at the legal level through our laws that are being passed at the state level, our now Supreme Court decision, in addition to an executive order, and what seems to be a culture building stronger to just get rid of in any way that is possible those with mental health issues and those who may be living unsheltered. How does that impact your advocacy? Do you feel defeated? And if not, how do you continue to have the energy and the stamina to continue to advocate when it seems like it's an insurmountable task?
I'll speak as a mother, as a mother. My problem with that is the automatic decision to criminalize. If somebody, I'm hearing some interference, but anyway, if somebody were to swoop my son off the street when he was homeless, right now he's in housing, so I'm grateful for that. There's a lot of ways that he got into it, including a wonderful social work organization. But if they were to criminalize the fact that he was sleeping in an ATM vestibule, he would have been jailed for being homeless. I would much prefer that he was gotten help. Like, oh, this person needs help. They haven't done anything wrong criminally. Let's get them into the hospital. Let's get them a bed. Let's get them services so that they can have not just housing, but services to stay well. My problem with all of these decisions is what happens to these people after they're rounded up. I'm not hearing anything about that. Where are they winding up? In our overcrowded jail systems? And if they're crying money, isn't it nearly as expensive to incarcerate somebody as to get them the help they need in a hospital? What happens after the roundup? That's my question.
And that's a very good question, because what is scary to me are these different detainment centers that are being built and created. One that has found to needed to terminate, and I think it's closed. I'm not sure what the status of it is now, but the
What day is it?
Because there is not a set criteria as to who will go to these places, because you don't have due process to have gone through the criminal system to go to a camp. So who will go there? And my fear is that that will be the place for people who are removed from the street involuntarily, whether they're homeless or there because they have severe mental illness. And it also be a place to have people who are who have severe mental illness to go just to get them off of the street. And my fear, as having a parent with severe mental illness, is being picked up and not knowing where she is, not having any information. And because there is no due process, no court monitored activity on whatever the issue may be, I would lose track of her. Others would lose track of their loved ones who are picked up for, I believe someone had mentioned about the way that their son looked. He was spotted and pointed out as maybe accused of doing some criminal activity because of the way that he looked. And that's a really real issue right now today.
Oh yeah, that's so important. Just even as a former public defender, that was probably the number one. That moment, you don't learn about how someone looks. That's not a part of our process. We all try to pretend like, oh, that doesn't matter. It absolutely matters. I've had clients where the prosecutor comes to me and like, they're being belligerent. They won't speak. And I go sit down with them and I'm like, do you not see their eyes? This is unwellness. And I have to start from that point, advocating differently because the way my client looked. And they just looked, it's drugs. No, it's not. And does that matter? Your compassion should still stay intact, regardless of how someone looks. But we have to have that in our purview, that we've been taught that matters. We've got to take that out. Every testimony month, I think of that term like, oh, good family, oh, good family. And when schizophrenia entered my family, it didn't matter anymore. We didn't qualify to look like a good family. And we have to, that starts with our compassion. Like my loved one just looked like a criminal. But why should that matter so much? Do you know what I mean? It takes on so many meanings in our society that never help you get to where you need to be. And the criminal system is just not the place. And we've decided that criminals look a certain way, and that will keep our loved one in a detrimental experience. They might just want to go out of the house and get water. But if they look a certain way, we've already decided they don't belong in our neighborhoods, that they don't belong in hospitals. It's one of those places in empathy that I didn't think it would be so apparent in a courtroom, that my client could be wrongly dismissed as a criminal, which is weird. Like, I'm defending people who have been accused of crimes. And it's like, but if you're going to judge them on how they look, why aren't you using empathy with that? Why is it a cruel judgment that they deserve less somehow? And of course I knew the justice system. I just never thought that impact, that would be so impactful. That a word like belligerent, they look belligerent, they seem this way, and now they don't get treatment. They don't get
and justice. Unfortunately, it's happening in the medical system as well. But yeah, it's happening in the medical system as well. And it's just such an unfortunate thing. You're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, to go through the process, to have due process. And Deborah, it just also reminds me, you had mentioned about church, and a church being a place that should be more welcoming as well. And I know my mother said that the pastor at a church that she was going to asked her not to come back with pink hair. My mom likes to wear, different color hair, and I was mad, and I wanted her to tell me which church was this, because I was going to go and have a conversation. This is supposed to be
I would go with you.
Come ye as you are, to worship God. We don't have to look any certain way to worship God. That's what it was supposed to be about. And yet she was being ostracized because of her hair. And I'm like, well, like Nicki Minaj wears pink hair, I'm thinking all these performers that wear different color hair. And but in that moment, I guess it didn't matter. It made her stand out in some kind of way that others didn't feel comfortable.
I have a podcast from the Make Them Hear You series we did called Chris Evans Enters the ER. And it just does this comparison. If you look like Chris Evans or Captain America and you enter the ER in psychosis, or versus you look, how many different ranges? How far from Chris Evans are we from getting that kind of treatment? We all fall somewhere where we might not get the best treatment. And I just think it's something that we have to look at. Sorry, interrupting.
No. I just wanted to point that out, with Deborah and what she has said. Deborah, how do you think we can advocate more in our, if we're faith-based and affiliated with a faith-based organization, how can we incorporate our advocacy in that space?
Well, I was just listening to this conversation. We need more conversations like this. I noticed we all probably have a sense of fear. We go from fear to anger. I think that's caused a lot of advocates to not speak up. And I think more moms need to speak up, even regardless. That's the only way it's going to change. And these kind of conversations. And I fully agree with you. These are important things. And I think another thing in the conservative movement right now, empathy is a bad word, because they're tying that to some of the policies that the last administration did. And so I think as Christians, we really need to step back and say, what does God have to say? What does the Bible say about this, about justice? He has a lot to say about this and judging people. And we even experienced that as well. We went to a In-N-Out Burger down the street from my church, and my son, because he looked a little different, and he had on my husband hunts, and he had on one of my husband's jackets. They called the police right in the middle of In-N-Out Burger. The police came up to my son. He was doing nothing. He was just sitting there with our family. He had family in town. And my husband kind of had to hold me back because I was gonna, but it's true. And I think in some communities, it's even, it's much more significant than that. And so I think we need to humble ourselves and listen, look in the mirror at ourselves, because I think this is the number one most marginalized issue that's happening in our current day. And I think of James, the Bible says that religion is looking after the widows and orphans. I think these are the orphans that we're ignoring in this current time. And so what fuels me is my faith, and what fuels me is, we have a good outcome. And so I want to use that to serve other people and just continue on, keep going. And I really want other advocates to speak up. Speak up. Don't be afraid. Use your anger for speaking up.
Randy, you had a point?
Well, we could probably talk for an hour about this, but I will say that and this is partly my work as an audiobook narrator. I narrated an audiobook about the body of Christ and why are there so many different ways to be Christian and why do we fight each other, which I found very interesting. She was a PhD in sociology. And so it was interesting for me, I'm Jewish, to look at that and go, yeah, we do the same thing in Judaism. Oh, they're Orthodox, they're Reform, they're conservative, there are so many different ways. I hope we can all agree. There are so many different ways. Saying I'm a Christian means a lot of different things to different people. And yes. I think, in any religion, I think there are the extremes, and then there are the people in the middle who often don't get mentioned in the press, the people who believe in being good to each other and peace be with you. And we all have all of that in common. I think if you look at the heart of any religion, at its best, we're all trying to be good. We're all trying to have empathy, and yet the extremes get the press. So that I will say I belong to a Reformed Jewish congregation. And when my son first got ill, I went to the rabbi for help, and I noticed in the waiting room, there were pamphlets on everything. Oh, my loved one has cancer. Oh, my loved one, nothing about mental illness. And the rabbi was really helpful. And I brought this up to him, and he said, oh my God, we have to change that. And as a result, in my congregation, they invited me to come speak to the congregation about the family experience. They invited a panel of somebody with schizoaffective and me representing a parent and a psychiatrist and a rabbi to talk about, and people came and they created a mental health committee. So I think that wherever we are, hopefully we're in congregations that are receptive to our needs. And if they're not, we need to look at that, or change it. So, you know, luckily in my case, I advocated for what I thought was missing, and I'm still in that congregation because they heard me and they changed things. And that is what I think in terms of advocacy we can each do within our own faiths, is to support what we so believe needs to be supported, and then question what we need to question and see if we can have some effect.
I want to add that if I could have one wish, it would be for people like Lawrence Jones to be in front of a person he knows and loves and have that person turn to him in psychosis and say something like, I speak and hear aliens, and I think I am the creator, or I am the creator, or I am existence. And when you say to them, well, maybe you might need some medication because I don't think you're well, and they look at you and they're like, no, I'm fine. There's, CIA agent behind me. That's real. I mean, these are illnesses that you can't understand until you're in front of them. And when you do have that, you wonder what can be done. Well, there are programs out there, the assisted outpatient treatment program. There are certain states that have criteria of psychiatric deterioration as opposed to dangerousness. And this is more of what the focus could be on. I think when you don't know a subject, you just lump it all in one mysterious clump and don't look at it. But we who have lived with it and around it have answers and solutions that could be talked about. And that's what's not on the news enough. But yeah. I'm grateful that we're talking at least now.
Absolutely.
I agree.
Oh, go ahead.
I said I came into this work so that no other family would have to go through what mine went through. And while you're right, so many people have to see it, they could just listen. They always go somewhere. You could just, how long have the people who run our institutions, who run our commentary, who influence others, refused to just listen? I am so tired of us needing to be a society where the worst happens. We got to plug into that empathy and just listen and respond in the right way. We've got to stop responding in a way that makes us comfortable and unbothered. Like that is what the well ones are doing. I did a whole speech on a reasonable accommodation. As a well person, I never have to settle for what someone else thinks is reasonable for me. We have got to start listening like we are well and capable, and we're just giving leftovers. I went on a cruise. There was not a reasonable thing about sailing in the middle of the Bahamas and eating pizza at 3 a.m. We could give a modicum of that infrastructure to severe mental illness, and people would thrive. We're refusing to listen upstream. And I agree with you, but I just internally want no one to have to feel it for themselves to be able to listen. Like that hurts my heart so much. But part of me, when I saw it, the first thing I thought was, you don't know anybody. And it shouldn't have to come to that. I agree. It's such a rock and a hard place. But we able-bodied people, we just always want to do the tiniest bit. And we look around the world and every bit of infrastructure is for us. We're not listening and including. Sorry. That's my thing.
I appreciate that. And as we begin to close out, I do want to talk about stigma more, because the statements that were made, both the call for incarceration and the call for lethal injection, were wrong on so many levels. Again, the conflation of homelessness and severe mental illness, the lack of information, spouting out misinformation, all of it was deserving of more than an apology, in my opinion. Perhaps they should do a whole segment to talk about these things and to address real information, real lived experience, and to create a better understanding, because this is a very sensitive issue. As I always say, and I'm sure you all say it as well, mental illness, mental health it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter your socioeconomic status, where you live on the globe. It is a 365 global issue. And if anything, yes, that's what connects us. But what also connects us is just humanity, basic humanity. And I appreciate you all coming on. And as we go our way to increase awareness and to advocate in the strongest ways that we can, what do you feel can help reduce the stigma? Because this definitely did not help in terms of the way that people view severe mental illness. And even as Deborah pointed out, that this is not an isolated incident. There is like this, I've even mentioned, it's just a culture. It's a culture, and it did not help how we view severe mental illness, how it's depicted in the media, how it's depicted in movies such as The Joker and others, that don't help in terms of the community at large having a certain level of fear about anyone that they think, by the way they look or otherwise, has severe mental illness. So in your closing remarks, how can we reduce stigma? And please share any resources that you have found helpful in your work and with your families. And I'll go with whoever would like to start first.
I'll go. I definitely want the Sandy Pruitt Project to be looked at. It's a online resource of anonymous family members who have their loved one's story spelled out in specifics of what they've gone through in this day and age of a broken mental health system. So the Sandy Pruitt Project, Preutt. And also we have a series of interviews that was done on this podcast called Why Not Me? And if you listen in a row to this podcast, these interviews, it's for autism and serious mental illness, but we had for the month of May just to focus on serious mental illness, and he's decided to continue on and keep adding that in his work. That is our podcast that I highly recommend, Why Not Me? And if we could have a general knowledge of what psychosis is, what is the difference between a hallucination, a delusion, a fixed false belief. These are terms that not many people know, but once you do know them, you get it. And anosognosia, the most important term, if we can have a sympathetic ear about, the ones who don't know they're ill, then lawyers, judges, doctors, family members, even physicians will have a light go off, and they'll never not know that word. They'll never not know what that looks like in psychosis and in mental illness. And that, once you know, you empathize because it's knowledge. So I think that's what we need.
Deborah?
Well, our organization has created a caregiver support discussion guides for churches to host. It's very simple. We laid it out. We also will do training for churches. We have a crisis care training, and we also have the support group that is turnkey ready. And we'd be happy to train any church in that. And it's been a long time we've developed that by actually doing it. And then I also started a podcast. It's in the beginning. It's on Substack called Mama Bear Diaries, and it's undoing everything you learned about schizophrenia from Criminal Minds. So give me a follow. Just help out any way you can. But yes, thank you for having us on. And I think stigma will end when we actually get people off the streets and actually care for them and actually do the right thing.
Randy?
Yeah, and I will definitely check out that podcast. It sounds wonderful. And I support education, respect, empathy. My son is still one of the sweetest people you'll ever meet, one of the smartest people you'll ever meet. For that to come through, he needs to be clean, sober, and sane. Yesterday, luckily for us, he was all three because he has some required treatment right now. And even got a haircut and looks incredibly different, luckily because he's going to courts. I mean, so it's like that person that is homeless was somebody's beloved baby, or someone's beloved mother or spouse, or to see the goodness underneath the illness is the beginning of the empathy. And our podcast, Schizophrenia, 3 Moms in the Trenches, 3 moms that are authors of memoirs, which is another good resource for you to have. We all have sons with schizophrenia. I would recommend, we have a lot of episodes of information. And one of the experts we interviewed was Brian Stetton, who is New York Mayor Adams' mental health advisor. And he tells stories in his second appearance of the success of not just getting people off the street, but getting them into treatment, of people that have gotten back in touch with their families. There is possibility and goodness in a good many of the people that you think are hopeless on the streets. And I always say the National Alliance on Mental Illness Family to Family is a free course that will give education to help.
Yes. Sabah?
Stigma can be a lot of things. And education, like everyone said, is the best place to start. But I think the pre-work is knowing that we all have blind spots, knowing that we all have bias, and we have got to be willing to look. We've got to put down those narratives of the good family, the deserving people, the deserving groups. And we have to realize if we live long enough, we will be a part of all of those. So why not build the infrastructure for that? Who is it? I would be like, my favorite quote on this is, George Washington Carver says something about success in life is being, delicate with the young and tolerant of weak and strong, because you would have been all of those at some point. We really have to get into that, because if you don't believe, like Randy said, that there's help for these people that you see, you'll skip to some horrible conclusion. I don't know why the well people always have the most barbaric ideas. We need to get back upstream and know that we are our neighbors. Our neighbors aren't failing to be like us. They're not, they're being left out of a system that intentionally excluded them. And we can change that. Like you said about religion, if our worship houses aren't offering it, let them know and watch them change. So while education is the most important, Corey, you have a book, Randy has a podcast, Deborah has her entire Substack series, Laura has articles, NAMI, there's a wealth of information. But if you are sitting thinking you don't have a bias, thinking your compassion can't grow, thinking you can't look at those blind spots, you'll never find it. You'll never find the wealth of information that is here, that is part of multiple ideas at the table that deserve to be heard.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining Corey Empowers Mental Wealth Wednesday. This was definitely a wealth of information that was shared today. And as always, I encourage people to check out CoreyEmpowers.com and download your free My Go-To Mental Health Guide. And I am definitely going to add some new resources after this interview today. You all have given some great resources that I'm so honored and appreciative of you all sharing with us today. So with all of that, thank you so much. Stay lifted, stay encouraged, and please keep advocating. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been an honor.
Corey, I meant to say National Shattering Silence.